This is on sending your children off to college. All right, good. Please join us. That's great. I have some remarks to make, but I was thinking that more than anything, I might facilitate a conversation. Okay, if you're just as well with that. And my own experience, and this may help you understand why I might be suitable to talk about this, is I'm a Lutheran seminary graduate. I also have a PhD in classics. I teach at KU right now, University of Kansas in Lawrence, and I've taught at University of the South in Sewanee, Tennessee, which is an Episcopalian institution, so the far left wing of Protestantism. I've taught at St. Olaf College, which is an ELCA institution where I was also educated. And at Bethany Lutheran College, which is an ELS, Lutheran College. I taught there for a decade. So I've sort of seen the gamut, okay? And I frankly don't know exactly what advice I would give to a parent sending their children off to school because of this. Every kid is different, and I think one of the really important things to bear in mind as you look at your kids is where their interests lie. Okay, some of them want to be engineers, and if they want to be an engineer, send them to a place where they get a great engineering career. That's a wonderful thing to do. Others of them are more exploratory at this stage, at age 18, and there I think you can have a stronger hand in it. And yet, I really, Gene would know this too, the number of students that we end up dealing with in colleges and universities who are miserable because they don't want to be where their parents told them they had to go. And that's always a bad way to go down. You're losing tons of capital in terms of influencing your kid's life. And if the goal that you have in mind for when your kid leaves college is still to be attached to the evangelical Lutheran Church, there are certain battles you want to fight and certain ones that you don't want to fight. I'm convinced of this. I've seen it too many times. So I guess that's my sort of prefatory remarks. Now, there are different sorts of scenarios out there, right, for institutions, okay, and I'm thinking about this. There are Lutheran institutions, okay, right, Concordia system, the Bethany Lutheran College, Wisconsin Lutheran College, we all know what they are. There are other Christian institutions, like where Gene is teaching, Hillsdale may be marginally sort of Christian. Then there are other private institutions. These tend to be what they call the top 100 liberal arts colleges, right? And then you have the massive public institutions like KU, University of Missouri, and other places. And every single one of these places has both promise and problems. Okay, and maybe if we sort of talk about each of those four things in terms of their promise and their problems, this will help you think about yourself. With Lutheran institutions, the promise is great, right? Your kid is surrounded by or in theory, surrounded by other pious Lutheran students, has a greater chance of marrying a Lutheran. That's why my mom and dad they told me that they would pay for my education if I went to a Lutheran institution, and they wouldn't if I didn't. And the reason was because they wanted me to marry a Lutheran. So I ended up going to St. Olaf, which wasn't a good choice for that, because they're all right? So socially, your child is very likely to develop friends who are Lutheran at a Lutheran institution. Okay. In addition, there's that there's a Lutheran chapel on the campus. Okay, that's a good thing. You also know that there's Lutheran theology in the classrooms, right? At least in the theology classrooms. That's the promise. Okay. The problems are manifold. They're dealing with them. How many of you have been into a chapel on one of the Concordia College campuses lately? How was it?
diversity?
Yes, right, okay, diversity is the name of the game, right? Last time they used the Lutheran service book in a lot of these places was a long time ago. And so, the message is mixed, really, even from the chapel. In the theology classrooms, I think, generally speaking, so for example, Mequon is pretty solid, isn't it, in terms of the theology?
Yeah, so was when I was there.
And I think you find pockets of this, maybe whole departments where the theology is good, but you'll find equally problematic institutions, okay, where the theology departments are not as solid as they probably could be. Another issue with the Lutheran institutions is that the Lutheran population at these institutions is going down. It's falling out of the sky. 30 years ago, you could have thought in terms of 95%. Today, you're thinking in terms of 60, 40% Lutheran students. Okay, so that benefit, in a sense, is kind of out the window, right? You go to the University of Minnesota and encounter as many Lutherans as you would at Concordia St. Paul. Maybe. You know what I'm saying? Okay? So those are some of the problems that I think you encounter in the Lutheran institution. And a final criticism that I have of the Lutheran institutions is that I don't know that they take academics as seriously as they could and should. Right? And this is why I don't teach in the Lutheran institution. Actually, drove me crazy. I called it at the time, don't quote me, the craftification of Lutheran undergrad. It drove me nuts. There's a sort of lowest common denominator approach to teaching that, as long as you have Jesus as your sort of blankie for bedtime, then you can get by with virtually anything in the classroom. And that's insufficient. Yeah, do you want to?
Isn't that true too for the admissions policy?
Mm-hmm.
So that brings the whole academic level of the institution down.
Exactly.
You're taking anyone just because you want to ship it.
And also, what they've done at Mequon, for example, is sort of the church growth mentality applied to college. They started a pharmacy program, and the reasoning was that so many people apply to pharmacy at University of Wisconsin and don't get admitted. So you've got a big market for it. So you're kind of committing to mediocrity.
Yeah.
You're taking the ones that can't get into a good school, starting a program where you're not attracting Lutheran students necessarily, and you're not getting Lutheran faculty to teach it, but you're growing and you're getting bigger numbers and making money, and that's what drove me crazy about it. So yeah, the commitment to academic quality is not as great as it ought to be. And the other thing, when you think you're going to a Lutheran college, and it's not Lutheran, that makes you think there isn't such thing as Lutheranism, or it can. That can be upsetting to somebody who's
Well, you're exactly right. And if I can share a personal anecdote, at the end of my time at Bethany, I seriously toyed with going to the Eastern Church. I was that nervous about the future of Lutheranism, about Lutheranism altogether. And since then, what was happening there is that God was putting my face over the yawning pit and saying, "Look at this," and that was a good thing. Everything's fine now. But the fact is, and you're exactly right, that it can lead to a sort of despair of your faith in the institution. Okay, and of course our faith is in God. But look, we all live in communities, and to be faced with this. With sort of systemic, wouldn't you say, a systemic kind of failure is really depressing, actually. And if your kid is a serious Lutheran, I think you need to bear that in mind.
Our experience would have been that our kids were very conservative and grew up in a very conservative Lutheran home, exposed to Lutheran College that wasn't theologically sound really opened their mind to, well, even in Lutheranism, there's all this opportunity, including in the science department, evolutionary thought, that all of a sudden it just expanded there, and they took the wrong path from a Lutheran school.
And it's because it has the imprimatur of the church, right? Isn't that
Exactly.
the point?
I mean, it was all under the auspice of the Lutheran Church. It just opened doors and avenues, and they wanted to think of themselves as being, you know, very educated, and so maybe looking into things that were a little different, and that's what they did. But it started in the science department, and I suppose too in the theology department. I don't know specifically that, but I do know the science department.
Yeah.
Can I ask what school that
Stewart.
was? Stewart.
Stewart.
Oh,
Yeah.
I did.
Does that surprise you? Yeah.
Isn't they surprised when they hear these stories from our system?
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be that way, and yet it's so
We didn't even
frustrating.
realize it was happening. I mean,
Yeah.
it just, you know, it was a trust factor that you're, you
Yeah.
know, and my husband went, and, you know, my daughter, everybody just but they all had different expertise, and in that department, that was really introducing. You could be a Christian and still believe all of
Yeah,
these
well,
things.
one problem in Lutheran schools, in spite of VLCA schools, a big time, but also very conservative schools, they don't understand the doctrine of the two kingdoms, but they use it to justify being just like the other school, every other secular ideology. You know, they'll say, well, the doctrine of two kingdoms. Yes, we teach creation in our theology classes, but in our biology classes we teach evolution because we the doctrine of two kingdoms, the secular, but the two kingdoms means that God is the king of both.
Yeah.
And he works in the kingdom of the left hand by virtue of his creation and his moral law. And if you don't believe in creation and moral law, you don't have the two kingdoms. But it creates a dualism among Lutheran professors and Lutheran institutions. And I heard the president of St. Olaf develop this in these terms. And you know, this allows us to be completely secular as long as we have our religion classes. And it makes a dichotomy, and it tears the person up, forces them to be two different people and think in two different ways. And
That is exactly
Really?
what happened. That, you know, the statement of faith was there, but that's the religious part of them,
Yeah.
and then the secular part is to go off into a scientific and what proof says and what the world is saying all about all of it. Exactly.
I have a question, just getting back to the academics, did you find that the synods all were guilty of this?
Yeah, this is a systemic problem. Yeah, and I want to go back and just make a check by Bethany Lutheran College, where the chapel still is a diehard Lutheran chapel. We will actually use the hymn book there as evangelical Lutheran hymnary. It's a different book, but I mean it's good. It's good. It's good. And that's solid Lutheran preaching. But again, there's this sort of, and you know, one of the things that this leads to that you were talking about and that you're talking about is what Robert Benny, are you familiar with the name of Robert Benny? He's a Lutheran sociologist, social commentator, called a sort of pietism. And don't confuse that with technical Lutheran pietism, but a sort of pietism where your faith life is one thing and it's in one compartment and everything else is something else. And that's it's very easy to create that in a Lutheran school or in a secular institution. And the key is finding a place where your kid can live both faithfully as a faithful Lutheran. And that's the tough thing.
I do want to say something critical at Mequon and other places. There's some really good Lutheran professors, and you can get a really good Lutheran education if you know what you're doing and have that guidance. And so I don't want to dismiss them totally.
Yeah.
But it's just so frustrating, to hear that and the things that I remember. So we got a great system, but we need to breathe new life into it.
Well, and I would point to Stuart as saying they were I know we're talking about the institutions, but they're the problem. I mean, I look at the responsibility of a child, a young adult to say, I know that's wrong.
Well,
And,
sure.
well, you know what I mean? They're
But
responsible
still.
for what they believe, but,
Yes, and yet, the other thing we have to bear in mind is that college teachers have an extremely powerful influence over students. You wouldn't believe it. A friend of mine in Sewanee, Don Huber, from New Jersey. John, you always talk about the erotics of pedagogy. It's erotic, John, right? But well, you know what? He's right in a certain way. The number of, you probably experienced this, but the number of kids who end up with crushes on the teacher, girls, okay, for me, or even boys, they're like boy crushes, right? They think you're the greatest thing since sliced bread. That expresses the huge influence that you can have on a kid. And so there's a great trust that is laid in the hands of the college educator. Even though your 18-year-old should know right from wrong, yet we all know how to play those strings pretty well, don't we? I mean, you learn it after a number of years. So I think that's an important thing to bear in mind. Your kids are.
well, I think there's that where the kids want to be independent of their parents' thinking,
Yeah.
and we were thinking we were sending our children to people who these instructors were going to come alongside us and support those beliefs in which they had been brought up, and in most part it was. She went through. I mean, there is just not everyone, but it is some classes and some.
Yep, sure is. Well, that's the Lutheran schools, and we don't mean to take down the Lutheran schools. So there are certain positive things about it, and you can, as Gene is saying, you can, if you know who to look for, you can find the right people. But it takes a sort of sixth sense or some time on campus before you know who you're dealing with. There are other Christian institutions. Okay, St. Olaf College is a great example of this. A Lutheran institution that's ELCA. Sewanee is a good example, and then there are a lot of good Catholic, Notre Dame, Catholic schools, and Baptist schools, Baylor and other places. Now, if your kid goes in with his eyes wide open to a situation like that and is looking to smell out Baptist theology or Roman Catholic theology or whatever, it can be a very good experience for the student. Okay, the student is then forced, because of this sort of known opposition, to look into what he or she believes. I think I learned my synodical catechism so much better in my first 2 years of college than I ever would have had I gone to a synodical institution, okay, because I was forced to do it by my theology classes. And if your child is prepared for it, they can handle it. They can actually handle it. They can handle it. But you need to teach them to be proud of being a Lutheran. And there's nothing wrong with it. This is what this autonomy was that Tom was talking about in the section before. The ability to be able to say, this is where I stand, and I can reckon with the material that you're giving me, but I stand at my own position. It's a lot easier to do at an ELCA school or an Episcopalian school than it is an LCMS school, because there the message sounds like it has the imprimatur of the synod. Those tend to be high quality institutions. Okay, there are a number of very high quality academic institutions run by other institutions, churchly institutions. And so if you want your kids to get a real leg up in society, that's a great way to go. A lot of times, however, what's happening more and more frequently is that the core, the liberal arts core, is being gutted from the curriculum, and often when it's in place, things are taught in such a revisionistic fashion that the student would be hard pressed For example, if you took a course on American history, this is what we had at Sewanee, okay? This course from the colonies of 1815 or whatever the year was. Basically, it was social history. The person was an expert on shopping in the South during this period, and this is what the history course was. So the student taking this course missed all the big events. Okay, so if you think there's something that we would call a canon, whether historically or in terms of literature or whatever, you're not always going to find it, even though the course description looks like it's going to deliver that kind of material. Which is why a place like Patrick Henry stands out so prominently in this sort of morass of, I don't know, what, postmodernism, revisionism, whatever you might call it.
Okay, well, good. Thank you. We have a 63 credit core curriculum, core classical liberal arts, 63 credits. I mean, most places that maybe 30 at the most, and then that's a menu. Choose one history course out of 5 choices. Here, everybody picks the same one. They take 4 history courses, logic and rhetoric, and reading great books, and it's really a good, very much a classical liberal arts curriculum, and it really shows, I mean, in the accomplishments of our students. The students really appreciate it. So yeah, so we're trying to keep doing that right. And my wife who's here does assessment studies, and there's one assessment done by I think the Collegiate Studies Institute or something from the really good, well-known Ivy League colleges, where in American history they actually come out knowing less than they did when they came in. They destroyed all that they thought they knew. Whereas ours, we're at the very top of all those kinds of assessments, so very proud of that. But yeah, I would look, a lot of schools that have a good academic reputation, like many of these, very, very elite. So actually, when you're doing all the revisionist stuff, you're not really necessarily learning very much, and a lot of times, looking for a good, core curriculum like that. And there are a few other schools, not a lot, but things like that, I would look for quality. Look for the content.
That points up a secondary function of higher ed, which is a social function, and the reason that these top 100 institutions are so highly thought of is because they actually, if you get a degree from, I don't know, the University of Chicago or Notre Dame or whatever, I mean, that gives you connections like you would never have, really, frankly, coming from Patrick Henry. Okay, that's going to develop over the years, but they're just, it's a fact. It doesn't mean that the education's better at all. That needs to be borne in mind. Let's see. Other private, we basically handle that. How about the public institutions? The public institutions are a real mixed bag again. You can go to a place like the University of Wisconsin-Madison or University of Minnesota. I mean, this is what I think in terms of the North, because that's where I'm from, wherever. And if you get into a decent department, you can get a very good education. You really can. The problem is, of course, that so many of the classes are taught by TAs. My wife, for example, runs a basic course in speech at KU. They teach 48 sections a term. There are no PhDs teaching those sections. Okay, it's all graduate students, and a lot of those kids, I mean, they're just out of college, so they're teaching the next crew. It's not that good of an education at the end of the day. But as I say, you can get into a good department that would be very helpful. And of course, if your child wants to be an engineer or do microbiology or things like that, I mean, a place like KU is unparalleled. You can't find better places to become an engineer because they've got a great engineering department. That's just the way it is.
Do you have any advice on how to find, how do parents find which departments are good.
Okay, we'll get on to that, and that's a very good question. Usually, if you go to the department website, you can tell. For example, if you went to my department website at KU, I'm ashamed actually to be associated with the department because every single one of my colleagues has written about sex in the ancient world, and they make a big deal about this. This is really cool. Now, that's a way to get tenure. You write about the sexy topics, literally sexy topics, and you churn out all these articles that a prurient scholarly mind wants to read, and you can get tenure. Okay.
Plus, you get a show on the History Channel.
You might get a show on the History Channel. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, about Cleopatra and
yeah, here's
Julius Caesar.
There you go.
Oh, good. Yes, right. Okay, good. I'm the weird outlier at KU. I think they hired me because I'm a straight white male Christian. Everybody else is, gay or lesbian or Unitarian or Quaker or something like this. That's just the way it is. Now, I think the influence is there. My one gay colleague is a heavy recruiter for gay, lesbian, bi, and transgender stuff. There are students who I have observed over the last several years who have come in straight and left KU gay. That's a bad thing, and that's actually happening at the secular institutions. I can't put up a cross on my door, but he can put up an upside down pink triangle, and this is the way it is. I can have a crucifix in my office, but he can have a phallus. Go figure. It's tough in the secular institutions, and yet the kids, students recognize when it takes me 3 days, and the students come up and say, "Are you a Christian?" Or, how come you're not talking about? How come you don't use foul language all the time? They notice right away. And your kids, if they go off to a public school and find these teachers soon, they're not ubiquitous for sure, but they're on campuses.
Find the ones that are going to prefer to be.
Well, they might find those ones too. They might find those ones too. What you do is you find an insecure boy or girl, and you start saying, "Well, if you ever think about that, you might like girls," and that's how it works.
One thing that's helpful as far as state universities like that, sometimes if you can find one with a really good campus ministry, for example, our daughter Joanna, you're talking about, she usually comes to these things, she went to the University of Minnesota largely because John Pless was the campus pastor there for the United Lutheran Center that he ran at that time. Now he's at Portland Seminary. He's a really good professional Lutheran theologian and a really good campus pastor. And so she got really active in that, and although she faced all these, bizarre and bad things in some of her classes, she had that grounding and that personal support from other Lutherans, and because of the climate, whereas in a Lutheran college you sort of can take for granted and then find yourself drifting away, it's so evident at a big campus like that, difference between Lutheran Christianity and everything else he was finding in classes. But anyway, that gave her a really good grounding, and she came out very strong and professional. At the same time, she's came out of the battle with some of these others, and it really strengthened her faith. So anyway, that's a good tip to look for a good place with campus ministry. That could make up for a lot of things.
Makes up, for a world of deficits. And actually, what I've got here for you is just piggybacks on what Gene has done. There are several websites here that you can use for finding a parish where your kids may end up going. This top one is one I just started about 3 weeks ago, and it's an attempt to make a registry of all the Orthodox Lutheran faculty in the United States teaching in non-Lutheran institutions. Okay, Right now we've got 24 people, but you know, it's only a few weeks old. We're building, and if you know of any, like you're in Lincoln, if you got any faculty that teach at the university that go to your church, I'd love to know who they are and get in touch with them. And, but that's, you know, if we can build these kind of networks and put your kid right in touch with them. So you were asking about how your kid would find these departments. Well, if you've got these faculty members that you're aware of at a particular place, you can call that person up and say, well, can you tell me about the sociology department? What's it like? What else would be fine? And that's the idea of this list. Christ on Campus, some of you are familiar, most of you are familiar, I'm sure, with Higher Things, right? Christ on Campus is the college division of that, and they have a list of different chapters at various institutions across the states primarily. I don't know if there are any in Canada at all. But there's some 50 listed there, and those would provide the same kind of things that Gene was talking about, a strong external Lutheran presence for your son or daughter who would be encountering these kinds of things. And it's imperative for these chaplains at places like that to be conversant with the world of ideas. And I'm not certain that in every case that's true. I think generally with the Christ on Campus crowd, you would find it to be true, actually, right? Wouldn't you? I mean, that's my sort of general experience. Then, of course, there are these evangelical Lutheran liturgical congregations. You're probably familiar with that website. Are you familiar with that? Oh, it's a great resource. Yeah, if you ever want to go on vacation, don't know where to go to church, go to that. It's great. Closed communion and use of liturgy. And then, of course, the Find a Church list at issues, etc. So those are 4 different resources that you could use. And these would all be pretty much self-identified Orthodox parishes, right? People that voluntarily say we are Orthodox, and that's far better than sort of happenstance Orthodoxy. So that and this sort of segues into this next point, and it's this, that it's critically important for your child to be associated with an evangelical Lutheran congregation. And here I'm going to say something that may be anathema. You can give me 15 seconds, right? But you know what? Synods don't matter a pinch. It doesn't matter a pinch. If your kid goes off to a school where the only Orthodox parish is a Wisconsin Synod parish, say thank God. Okay, that just get over the kind of it has to be Missouri Synod or it has to be ELS or whatever. I'm totally convinced of that. We live in a very post-synodical age, and a lot of times you're going to find that the strongest alternative is going to be a brand that you're not. That's okay. In terms of that, however, one of the major attractants for smart kids who have been educated classically are going to be the Church of Rome and the Church of the East. Okay, and they're huge presences on campuses, and they're not evangelical in the same way that we are. They're not dropping pamphlets at kids' doors or anything like that. But they sniff these things out, and they tend to congregate around classics departments. In fact, as an example, a wonderful kid who was an evangelical Lutheran was in the classics department when I was teaching at St. Louis. And I tried to work with this boy and took him up to ULC at the Minneapolis, which is where we went to church when we were there. Great chapel, super high liturgy, great preaching, whole 9 yards. And my colleague is a hardcore Roman Catholic. And this boy went to the Church of Rome. And I couldn't do anything about it. But he was attracted by this sort of deep tradition of the church. And those people have a huge influence on your kids, and particularly on Lutherans, particularly when they despair of what Lutheranism looks like. And we all know that we're a sorry bag of maggots, as Lutherans say. Sack of maggots is what you call them. That's just the way it is, and maybe that's one thing to prepare your children for. All right, good. let's talk a little bit about what kids do in college, how they develop. Okay. Have you ever heard of Perry? There's a guy named William Perry who was a psychologist at Harvard. Have you heard of this guy? No. And he came up with a scheme of development. And most human beings actually go through this, but I'm just going to write it on the board for you. And this will help you understand what your kid is going through when they come home, right? And they start talking crazy stuff. Next step after that is relativism. Okay. Those of us who have been in the college classroom can, we witness this all the time. Students who show up at age 18 are complete dualists. They know right from wrong, and they aren't going to be told anything else. Right? Now, one of our jobs actually is to break that down, because frequently it's based upon a simplistic view of things, okay? Whether that's in a Lutheran institution or a secular institution, you sort of got to crack that nut, because a lot of times, as I said, it's very ill-informed. So what happens as a result of that is they go into the stage of multiplicity, where they recognize the existence of other opinions. And that they might not be wrong, okay? So that they can at least think about them. So maybe Roman Catholicism is okay, that's your thing. I'm a Lutheran. And from there, they go into this stage of utter relativism, okay? Where they really don't know what they think at all. And everybody is entitled to his, her, or her own opinion. And if I come up with my own opinion, hands off, man. Don't try to tell me anything about it, because this is where I'm at. Don't I have a right to this idea? You've got a right to yours. Utter relativism. And then finally, where you hope to get them, and where a great many of them come, is to this stage of commitment, okay? So they've sort of sifted through everything, and then they've come finally to be committed to the position that you think that they're going to stick with for the rest of their life. All right? Now this happens on so many fronts, it's ridiculous. Your child might come home as a socialist one Thanksgiving. Next Thanksgiving, he's going to be a libertarian, and the next one he's going to be, I don't know what, communist. I have no idea, but this is what happens. All right? It happens religiously. It happens with biological thinking. It happens socially, in all sorts of different ways, and you have to be prepared for that. Now, how do you handle it? Well, one of the things you can do is sort of observe. The other thing is to recognize that they are going through these extreme changes, and that an adequate response to your kid saying, "Gee, I don't know if I want to be a Lutheran anymore," is not, in my house, this is what it would have been. Damn it, you're a Lutheran. All right, when I was growing up. No, John, you're a Lutheran. It needs to be met by more than that. It needs to be met by discussion and putting them into contact with good reading material, and offering a lot of times when they come to this stage, they don't regard Lutheranism as a real alternative anymore. And the reason is frequently because they've got Sunday school knowledge of the faith. Right? You've got to. It's your responsibility if you're going to send them off to college to be prepared to talk to them about their faith at the level that they're dealing with it, or to put them in touch with someone who can. And that's why these chapels are so important. But this is what your kid's going to go through, and every single kid's going to go through it. I can guarantee it. It's going to happen at different times, different stages across their 4 years at college. And they may go through these stages very quickly with religion, and very slowly with politics, and at breakneck speed with science. It happens at different stages, different times all along the way. This is a very handy model to bear in mind. And it may be, I don't know, you're talking about your kids at Concordia, it could be that they got stuck here or here, and no one helped them get all the way back to this commitment to their position in view of all these different opinions. Frequently, I should point out, where they wind up here is not where they started here. So that's not necessarily a return to home. If you want it to be a return to home, it needs some nurture. Now, how can you help your kid in terms of religion? I think you need to send them off with some good books. And one of the major challenges that they're going to get from their fellows is, these are going to be theological challenges. Okay, even the prevalence of the sex culture on the college campuses is a theological issue. Basically, it's 80% of the students saying God's law doesn't apply to me, or God's law, what's that? Okay, and you need to arm your kid with the ability to say, well, God's law is relevant. It's relevant to me, and I don't plan to participate in the sex culture. Decision theology is attractive. I can see how it's working for you guys. But you know what? Scripture doesn't teach decision theology, so I'm very happy to remain Lutheran. Thank you. Okay. Where are the resources? Well, this new edition of Book of Concord that Paul McCain came out with has a great index. It's actually keyed in. There are 16th century ways of talking about things, and there are more contemporary ways of talking about things. The index actually has things like marriage between a male and a female, right? That's a helpful thing for somebody. But your students want to know where they can find the answers to these questions. And if they're left unarmed, they can't find the answers, they're probably not going to seek them out. And the sources that they find answers from are going to tell them what you don't want them to know or think about. So I've got a few good books there. The Concordia Study Bible, which actually is going to be helpful for them in talking to other Christian students, and the Book of Concord, which will serve them in the same way. Your kids, too, I think one of the things that I observe among college students is that they go off to college and they can become one of two spiritual creatures. They can either become the Epicurean or the pietist. Are you familiar with these figures? Yeah? Okay. They grow up in a pious household, and they go off to college and they either throw off the shackles and say, I'm going to live like I want to live, mom and dad aren't here, or they become an utter pietist and they sort of go in lockdown in a way. And I think both of them are sort of dangerous positions to wind up in. The pietist in particular gets drawn in by the sectarian groups like FCA, Fellowship of Christian Athletes, and other such groups. Those are a problem because their theology is diametrically opposed to ours. So that's something to bear in mind. And those groups are recruiting heavily on the campuses. Do you guys have an FCA chapter or not? No, you don't. Good for you. A lot of, at KU, we've got hundreds and hundreds of LCMS students. Campus ministry in Lawrence has 15 kids that go to it. And at St. John's, we take another 5 or 6 over to St. John's. Where are the other ones going? Well, they're either becoming Epicureans, or they're going off with the sectarians. And that's what I see all the time. Now, how do you arm your kid in advance? You teach them Lutheran theology. You just got to do it. It doesn't mean rote catechism stuff, but it means around the dinner table, theology has to be a topic of discussion. And if you don't know the answer, you can't say, well, we don't think about those things. You have to go look for them, or talk to the pastor, or find someone who has thought about that. But the more you make theology part of the daily conversation with your kid, I think the better off you are in retaining your kid within the Lutheran Church, no matter where he or she should wind up going to college. And that brings me to the, probably to the point that's most worth stressing at this point. Proverbs 22:6, train up a child in the way he should go, and he will not depart from it. And there's no way that at age 17 you're going to make all the changes that are necessary in your kid's thinking to prepare him for college if you haven't already been doing it up to this point. So encourage parents, yourselves, others to just make this something of importance to your child from day one. Ongoing catechesis, and that should be the trick. So those are a few things that I have to say. Does anybody have comments, questions, concerns? Maybe we can exchange ideas about these things.
In my experience, I have two older children who are through college. One was in Synodical College, one was in Methodist College. And I have a challenging 16-year-old at home that I'm not sure where she's going to end up and what she's going to end up doing. But I'm finding as I just kind of assess how each one of them is different, what seems to make a difference in how they operate on a college campus is not just where they were as far as what they knew they believed, which was very strong for both of them, but also where they were in their emotional maturity. What I'm praying with my younger one is that she's going to be a lot older, almost a whole year older than my other two when she hits the college campus. I homeschooled her. She was one of those late August birthdays. I decided she was going to be older by the time she hit high school because I saw the advantage of just those extra months of maturity in going through some of this already in high school and already having those challenging discussions. And when I try to talk theology just very lightly with her, her response sometimes is, well, Mom, if I cared, I'd really sit down and talk to you about it, but right now I don't. And I have to just go, oh, okay, we'll talk about it later, and go on, which is what I'm really praying, that we can work through some of the real tough things before we release her to the college scene, even as she goes through that. Maturity of children when they go through. My older ones were chronically ill during their high school years and went on emotionally to campus farther ahead because they had to make life and death priorities in their lives, and they knew what they believed, sought out the people. My daughter went to Methodist College, told the boys her freshman year, you can date me, but I'm marrying a Lutheran. And so the one that dared take her up on that started going to church at the local Lutheran church that we established for her when we moved her into her dorm, and the next day, got the relationship with the church that was, Lutheran church that was nearby that we trusted, and went a couple of weeks, traveled to her a couple of weeks to make sure that was happening, and then, it was just that easier for her on the Methodist campus than the son was at the Synodical campus where he was searching for a church home off campus that he could feel comfortable.
Couldn't find one.
Yeah, it was hard.
Yeah, I didn't.
Especially that stuff.
Yeah.
But I tend to think too that some of this happens even for some kids before they even get to college, and you just hope they're closer to the end, I guess, before they get there.
Yeah, and you hope they've got the resources to think about it, and
I've never figured out a way to formally do this. But one of the most effective things, and I've encouraged this with my own kids, is that they establish almost a mentoring relationship with a Christian Lutheran other than myself. So my one son wants to be an airline pilot because there happens to be an airline pilot in our congregation, and so we made sure that the two of them get together. He always monitors Mark spiritually, right? So it doesn't go on in tangents. And I've always wondered if there's some way we can do that formally for university students. And that's a hard, a hard.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just thinking I was thinking of that when she was talking, and when Jean was talking about the chaplain program, but that to me, that's one of the strongest things I think, and how important that is. And for that reason, because I do believe we need people to come alongside of us and mentor our children. We can't raise them by ourselves, and we need to have other supportive people. And to find that those people, like you said, when there's an airline, those are the things they're going to do. And what you mentioned, John, about how they're attracted to you. No one has found them someone to mentor them, and they're just sponges. And if we don't find somebody, or we don't introduce them to the chaplain and get a relationship with other kids started, I think they do, fall for anybody.
And maybe your list. So if you have some kid that's going into engineering, right?
Right.
And he goes to this school and there's a prof there, who's an engineer, that's just like the time.
Right.
More so than a chaplain going to the university chaplain.
Yeah, and guys like Talman and Veith at Patrick Henry, I mean, you guys have to have just a tremendously positive impact on Lutheran kids that come through there. And it's invaluable, and I think that's, I think you're exactly right. And actually, what is your daughter interested in? That'd be interesting. I think this idea is worth.
Oh, let's see, rock, music, and fashion design was last week. Well, we'll see. She's got 2 years of high school left. I'm
So let's just find a really orthodox heavy metal rock.
There you go.
Put them in touch with each other.
She's always dragging me to these small venues. Mom, you gotta hear this music. This is happy, joyful, celebrating music. It's not the dark stuff that you hear in normal. I mean, she's always putting a wonderful spin on things. But yeah, we'll see.
Oh, she's dragging.
Yeah, I know. And I'm being trouble.
See, Rast had a mullet and was in a rock band, right?
Rast did? Is that right? So you can turn out okay even if you had a mullet? Good. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm really anxious. I'm looking forward to the next year and a half when I see where she's gonna start to land in a real strong interest, so that we can start looking at where this is. So when you said that, I thought, okay, my road is church member, spiritual mentor, fashion designer. But yeah, that's a good idea, because their first attraction is going to be who thinks the way I do, and then how does that reconcile with my spiritual life and my faith?
Can I be an engineer and a Lutheran?
Yeah.
Oh, here's some glory. Yeah. How do you do it?
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing. And here we sort of have to check our own pieties at the door too, and say, you know what, if my kid wants to be an indigent rock band member, maybe she can be an Orthodox Lutheran too. Yeah.
Do you find that homeschoolers or private schoolers experience this differently than your average public school kid?
You can talk to this, but at Bethany, when I was there, we would get a good deal of homeschool kids, and they always came in. I always thought that this was super strong with those children, and it took a lot to sort of move them past that, look, I'm not trying to move them away from Orthodoxy at all. I'm trying to get them to think about what it means to be a confessional Lutheran, not just have these sort of catechism answers to it, right? But I find that they're really stuck in this dualistic stage. Now, maybe you're not, maybe you don't find that at all.
No, we get a kind of the cream of the crop of the really good homeschool students, and I know what you mean. I know what you're talking about. Sometimes with homeschool kids, you have actually the opposite problem. Students who come from a family where they're very controlled, and because a lot of homeschool families are kind of like that, but in a lot of strict religious families, like that, then they're suddenly on their own. They don't have those external controls anymore, and just go wild with their freedom and that sense of it. And the key, of course, as we Lutherans know, is to internalize what we believe in. And so many families, especially from very, fundamentalist kind of thing, where it's law. When the external constraints are gone, again, they go berserk. The trick is to raise your children so that they internalize what they believe and the way they know is right to live, so that when they're not under your thumb, they still will do what they should to whatever degree a human being can, out of their own volition, because they want to. Again, the gospel creates that love of neighbor and desire to follow God and so on. So a lot of homeschool families, though, you do see that because they're very close to their parents and they absorb the parents' views and identify with that, and they can function very, very well. Others, again, out of that sort of control, can handle it very well and have to learn the hard way sometimes how to live in the world. In general, homeschool kids that we get have been very well parented, which is kind of rare these days, where the parents spend just a few minutes a day with them. Homeschool kids tend to have been well parented, and that gives them a kind of security that is very beneficial, and they can function quite well. So it really varies. But I think homeschool kids, the ones that we see, although there is some of that obviously, but I don't know, not that much more than when I was teaching at Concordia with Bruss school or homeschool graduates.
John, are you homeschooled?
Yeah, at the high school. We have school up to 8th grade.
Okay, now you're yeah. And I think that'd be a different situation actually if they've already had some contact with a school setting, right?
They have, and we have a unique situation where they can take classes at the local community college. So by the time they go off to college, they will have negotiated part of the college scene.
Mm-hmm.
Not full experience.
Right.
Yeah, that's very, very, very common. And again, some of them, they go to college, and especially if they have a good classical training, as a lot of the homeschoolers do, much stronger curriculum than they'll get in public school or even parochial school sometimes. They'll be there. You go to regular school, and they've already studied this stuff. They've already read it. They're already far beyond their typical, freshman peers. And one problem some of them have is they get bored and don't study, but then don't apply themselves like they need to, because the parents aren't there to get them out of bed and to make them study. They don't do very well. It's not because they don't have the potential, but because they need to go actually to a more challenging sort of situation. Patrick Henry's kind of designed to be that kind of school where we're a very challenging curriculum. But the idea is take them where they are and then take them to the next level. Whereas a lot of colleges, they're so far advanced that it's oddly enough that can become a problem too.
A question about the new college and the online classes and what is your opinion about the education received there? And I just talked to my son about why he go all day to class when he could get those credits at night and have a full-time job. But I mean, I was wondering what is the difference do you see, and what might be better or worse? Or
Well, I think that at least the Whitford view of education is that it's not just about what goes in your head and what skill set you develop. Okay? That there's really something about character formation that goes on, and character formation occurs in a community. You don't become who you are apart from the influences of others and the reaction of others. And so I'm a very strong proponent of traditional classroom education because I think that it does have that character forming quality that even at a secular institution, a Lutheran student can benefit from. And the fact is, unless we live in sort of reclusive communities apart, off in the wilderness in northern Ontario, we're going to have to rub elbows with secular neighbors all the time, and developing the capacity to do that is extremely valuable. And that's character. The character formation that goes on. And I don't know I think you probably concur with this.
Yeah, I do. Again, from a parent's point of view, one function of college is to get the kids out of the house finally, right? And that's an important reason.
Let's put too fine a point on it.
Yeah. The thing about college is it's a transition from living in a kind of controlled environment to being on their own. Because they go to college, all right, they're in a dorm, but still somebody else is fixing their food and their meals, and they still have quite a lot of structure. They have a strict timetable, go to their classes and all. But it helps them to transition as they're functioning more and more on their own. Then they graduate, then they're ready to actually, be out there and family of their own and be in the workforce and the rest of it. So I think that's an important function of college in our culture, and it's an appropriate one. Online classes, we offer some, and they're good for if you're going to be home in the summer, take some online things, or if you get or if you want to wait a year to go and maybe take a few classes. But the ones that are completely online, they're usually not as high quality, and they're not as accepted as much in the business world or the working world, professional world, as an actual traditional degree. So, I think there's always going to be a part for the traditional colleges. I think that's always going to be kind of the optimum way, because again, it's not just going through classes, it's part of growing up and becoming an adult, and it's that transition time that would be hard to do without, I think.
I have a question about maybe a school like St. Paul here, where these are high school kids, and they have already established
disciplines and routines and stuff like that. And I mean, I don't even know how they fare, you know, when they get to college, but I mean, they've had to, I mean, everybody, it's a Lutheran school, but I mean, it's still, there's a lot, they've already matured.
This is the opposite of homeschooling, where you send your kids from a very young age, used to, at least this is just high school level, out of the house when they're still normally would be anything really hard as a parent and as a child. But that was the way it used to be done and still is in many places. That was the British elite system, those boarding schools that they sent their kids to from the time they were 7 years old. They didn't even grow up with their families. So, I don't know, there must be things to commend them because that was a system that was successful in some ways.
Well, as far as pastoral formation, it's ideal.
Okay,
I mean, you are taking a child at a young age and basically saying now everything is going to go towards pastoral formation, which is what this was aimed at. And I have to admit, because I went to school when I did undergrad, a lot of the guys graduated. They came in with a different mindset, and they were kind of weird. But as far as an ethos, it was well established by secondary university.
Well, even Mequon was a gymnasium before it was a four-year college. In fact, it wasn't until the, I think, 70s that it made the transition a different way. And a lot of pastors, even they're still serving, went through that system of boarding schools. So, I don't know, I think it does make a difference.
And it also establishes that fraternity, the bonds that are essential to maintain a homogeneity of the ministerium.
Which is a lot.
Yeah. Like all have this common formation. So in some ways, the more I think about it, it's almost an essential aspect to our understanding of sin.
This is the problem with the SMP program.
Yes.
It's delivered online. No character formation, and the same thing occurs for college students, whether they're going to be lay Lutherans or clerics. There's personal formation that has to occur. It occurs best in small classrooms at private institutions, frankly. Very expensive.
Yes, that even when Concordia River Forest and I was there with Teachers College, and there's still 13 of us teachers out there who get together every summer because we had that bond that was formed the 4 years there. And
it's not just a social bond, but it was a shared formation.
We
so you
grew
can
up
form it the
together.
same way.
We grew up together, and we say that now. And even those that seem to be on the fringe of the morality side of it have come full circle and said, I know that all of your children are not living with other people, that they are married before they live, but and it's amazing how that's just assumed because that's who we were. We grew up with that real strong bond of who we were and what we were presenting to the world when we had our time.
Something just struck me. I'm a Johnny, and my husband was also, but
Whitfield?
St.
Oh,
John's.
I didn't know you were Catholic.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
I mean, if the people from St. Paul were like way out there, St. John's, to our mind, is really way out there.
Yeah.
Geographically.
Yeah. Well,
There'd be dragons and St. John.
But that community that I can relate to is the shared professors. That's who you sit around and remember Bull, remember Celestia, that's what you carried with you. You know exactly what your theology was, you went through it with them, and that was really a strong thing. I'm not sure, you know. I think they do here. I mean, that is one thing that is.
I was talking to Pastor Mayo about this. The effect was that, you know, in seminary, you always have the weird professors. That's why they're in seminary. They're just weird, right? But because you go to a junior college and then a senior college and then on to teacher seminary or pastoral seminary, you've heard theology from many different voices. And so you get the weird seminary professor and you say, well, he's weird. And you can kind of sift it out because it's only one voice of many. Whereas now, so many have never heard theology from anyone. You walk in and hear the weird professor.
Right. Exactly.
John?
Can I switch gears?
Yeah.
We're traveling down.
Is there a future for a genuinely Lutheran classical college?
Well, actually, it's interesting that you bring it up. And this is a dream of mine. We had, I won't reverse a long story, but there are some opportunities that were missed.
You can buy me a beer later.
Okay. But I would, look, I think this is an important thing to talk about, and we're small, but so we can talk about it. What's going on here at the lower level needs to be sustained at the college level as well, and that's the missing link at this point in time. Is that there's just nothing out there. The curricula at these institutions, like you were saying about the pharmacy school at one, you know, it's just a hodgepodge, and there is something identifiable as a Wittenberg kind of curriculum and a way of doing things, and I don't know how we're going to make it happen. If we can, if one of the colleges goes defunct, can we buy the land and start it up? There's so many of us faculty. I call us Lutheran faculty in exile, who just can't find a way to make it work.
I would say this, when all the schools become exactly alike and become generic, they lose their reason for existence, and that's when they start closing. Our Concordia system is in a bad way. A lot of schools are in real trouble. The key to success in a big market is to have something distinctive, to have a niche, something that no one else is doing, and that's the key. And just the thought just excites me.
Are you taking applications?
Well,
I've got my CV up on my computer. I'll bring it down right after the session.
But wouldn't that be something? The key is would we find students who would come to this, and I think we would. I think we can start small. That's how all institutions start.
And you know, I was development officer at Concordia Seminary, and there are donors who are looking for a decidedly Lutheran school who are just waiting.
Well, Jiminy Christmas, put me in touch.
So do we need to get an exploratory group together? Some of you professors and people with experience at this level. I'm convinced there is a great deal of interest out there. I'm just talking with Dave Spears. I'm convinced that if nowhere else, there is a gold mine of interest in Lutheran pastors who have had enough languages and exposure to classical Lutheran education through the seminaries. There's a great deal of interest out there, just this sort of thing. Maybe just to give one anecdotal evidence, our first and second grade teacher for next year is the wife of the seminary, the vicar for the parish next door to us. He is really interested in classical education. He's a Bronxville graduate. Obviously didn't get a classical education there, but he's very interested in it. He's very interested in languages. And I think that's just one example of, there's a whole host of people out there. If you had a college with a very tight focus as to what you're doing, liberal arts, maybe pre-sim and teacher education and liberal arts and nothing more, I think you could get a class of 50 kids without working very hard.
That's good to know. I mean, what do you think about this?
Yeah,
Is that,
absolutely.
is this, yeah,
Actually,
okay.
when you said that, I'm going, that's exactly what St. John's was. Or
Yeah.
exactly, it was
That's
exactly.
Concordia Classical College, Casper.
And
That's
not only,
There you go.
not only that, in this post-synodical age,
Exactly.
when I
That's
was,
what
this
they
is
were.
what I was
The
getting
research is
seminary
involved.
to look at. There are tons, relatively tons of independent Lutheran churches. And congregations are no longer bound by synodical boundaries. They aren't saying, well, we'll only do LCMS, or we'll only do Wells. And to just say we are an unabashedly Lutheran institution for whoever. That's a lot of draw. And
Well,
from a donor perspective, that has a lot of draw.
Schwanonymous Foundation.
Yeah.
Can we start to be in touch about this? I'm very serious. I'm using Rena Skentes Musai as the sort of lever to get things rolling, and if we can start to chat, I would love to put together a board and move. I don't know if that's a conflict of interest for you. So okay.
But yeah, from a donor point of view,
Yeah.
you can go in with a real note of authenticity, and that's number one in establishing passport, as they say, industry.
And it's already been successful.
Yeah.
I mean, the history is shown.
Oh,
That's the way it
absolutely.
used to be, and it worked.
Patrick Community College just started 10 years ago.
How many students do you have?
Oh, I think maybe 20 or 30, and then we're 10 years later, we're at 300. It's a very vital institution, living campus.
Back in seminary, I was trying to get motivation to keep my German up and get into other things. So I put a little humble ad in the Reporter, and I got boxes and boxes of books from a Mrs. Beisel.
Yeah.
And I ended up with all these wonderful German books that were used by Theodore Beisel at St. John's, Winfield, Kansas, including an 1865 all-in-one volume examination of the Council of Trent. Okay. Wow. It'd be so nice to put all those to use again.
That's the learning that the Synod once had, that we Lutherans once had, and it's totally recoverable. We just need to find the heart to do it and work around the political system.
I think the time is right. We're getting there very quickly.
I'll come get your money.
All right.
All right.
Any more?
Amen.
Thanks for being attentive and thoughtful, and I hope this was helpful.